Okay, so could I ask you just to introduce yourself, your name and where you're from and how you ended up in Duleek?
Yeah. Well, my monastic name is David, Dewi in Welsh, David in French, because I was given the habit initially in France, so I was given the name of the patron saint of Wales. My own name would be a Welsh name, Alun Idris. It's the Welsh form of Alan, so that's the name. But the monastic name is something when you take the habit, change your name, so that's where that came from. But how I got here is a long story. I mean, it doesn't quite resume itself into one sentence. It's a long meander, basically, but it providentially got here. Do you want me to go into the story, sort of?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go into every detail, but yeah, I mean, was there a particular reason you came to Duleek or to Ireland? Because obviously you're from
I'm
Wales.
from Wales, yeah. The home language is Welsh, yeah. Well, essentially, what it was from an early age I felt the call to the monastic life, and then that led me to France, where I knew the monastic life was fairly strict, and I was enclosed in France for 10 years, and eventually what happened was I was transferred from La Trappe to La Trappe de Roscrea, there in County Tipperary, and there, unfortunately, I didn't settle because they were much more lax. They were a good community, but they were more open than what I'd been formed at, because we were formed in a very strict Trappist regime in France, and so I didn't settle. Anyway, then at that point I thought maybe we can actually do something in Wales. So I was involved with a few people there, and there was a hope that we might be able to start a foundation of a monastic sort in North Wales, and that has come back several times over the years. Eventually, my spiritual father was an Irishman and spoke Welsh. He was our chaplain. He sent me back to Ireland to enter at Kilnacrock, which is now closed. The Norbertines there, and they sent me to Rome to study it. So I was in Rome for quite a while, and then when I was out there, Kilnacrock got into trouble, so I went to see Cardinal Daly, and he advised staying out in Italy and getting ordained there because he could see what was ahead, and he was correct. And so I was ordained out there, and I was able to be novice master there in a new Norbertine house not far from Rome. So I was there for a long time, and then eventually, down the line, now years later, I asked if I could come back to Ireland as a hermit, and so I initially thought of living in a caravan in the area of Athboy where I have friends, but the bishop said, well, look, we've got a place for you, go to have a look at Duleek. So we did, and the bishop took me on here and gave me the use of the house, and he comes to see me every month. In fact, he was here the other day, so he keeps an eye on me. That's Bishop Smith. And so basically it worked out very well because of him. So that's the answer to your question, is because of him. The man at the hour of the deciding was Bishop Smith. He took it on, he risked everything. So he has a supernatural vision of things. He also brought other people in. He brought in the monks down up the road there, Silver Stream. There's a big community growing down very quickly. He also brought the nuns to Drogheda from America, the Franciscan nuns of the Renewal. So he's open-minded, but he knows what he wants. He wants a praying community. So that's therefore more or less his message was this: you pray for us and we look after you.
Okay, and in terms of just going right back to what you said, you felt a calling to monastic life.
Yeah.
I mean, so did you ever think you never you obviously were religious from a young age? Were you from a religious family?
Yeah, yes, a good. Yes, I was. Well, my family was, as all Welsh families, basically would be free church. We spoke Welsh, and then the local chapel would be our chapel. I was going there, and I was going to be a minister with them. But then, because of that interest, I was going a lot to other things, looking around, reading a lot of things, and then I got involved. Also, living quite a lot on the continent, because I was always opposed to France and these places. I thought the Catholic Church is much more united and bigger and more weighty than what we have, all fragmented, local chapels, all different. So that nagged me a little bit, and then
So was that wasn't a Catholic?
No, it was Baptist.
Church?
Yeah, it was Baptist. Yeah.
Which is a Protestant. Right.
Yeah, one of the free churches. In Wales, you see, it's basically the chapel you go to. You don't go to, certainly wouldn't go to the Catholic Church, and you wouldn't normally even go to the Anglican Church. It's the free churches you go to, these chapels, little boxes everywhere. That came out of the revivals in Wales. You have revivals, and that brought that.
What was?
The Welsh revivals.
Okay.
The kind of very charismatic. So basically that gave Wales what we have now, all the chapels. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm just adjusting my levels here. That's interesting. So what age were you then when you were drawn to the Catholic Church?
Yeah. I always found a fascination about it, I must admit, because even one day when I was a child, because my mother and I would discuss things sometimes when we were in France, and I could see how big the Catholic Church was there, because my mother was a French teacher, my father was a German teacher and Italian, and so going to these countries when I was a child, and I could see how the Catholic Church was actually interesting, even there. I mean, it's everywhere, it's powerful, it's always the same, wherever you go. But therefore, that was at the back of my mind. But to answer your question, what happened was I was reading a lot when I was 13, 14, 15, and already at the other 14 it was becoming pretty difficult to remain where I was. And then 15 definitely I couldn't stay anymore because I could see the whole weight of tradition was towards the Catholic Church. It's just, you can't, when you've seen it, you can't get away from it. That's the pure line back to the apostles. All the rest has come from there.
Okay. But, I mean, in terms of your strong faith, did that, I mean, even though it wasn't, your parents weren't Catholic, were they religious? You know, were you brought up with a strong sense of strong faith, or is that something that just came from?
Oh no, that was there. That was at home. Yeah, but the family was a good family. In fact, Dad wrote the history of the chapel before he died there, and Mum was one of the organists, and so yeah, that was part of the family definitely. Yeah.
So how did they feel about you then moving to the Catholic Church?
Yeah, well. Actually, they're very open-minded, I must admit. Dad actually took me to Ampleforth because my parish was run by Ampleforth. It was a Benedictine parish run by Ampleforth, and he stayed there. He met, of course, Basil Hume was the abbot then. He then became bishop, cardinal. But it was a big community, 120 monks. And see, because they were teachers, they saw, well, actually, this is a good setup because of this massive public school and also a college in Oxford. They weren't saying too much, but I think they would, if I was becoming a Catholic at all, I think they would have preferred me to go to that direction because that would have given a good educational background. I didn't listen to them, but I think probably they were probably correct, really. I ought to have listened more. But I went to the extreme form in France. But even there, they were very open-minded. They came to see me. And then when eventually I came to doing the doctorate, my community couldn't afford it, so my mother paid thousands for me to be able to do the doctorate in Rome because it's very expensive business. And she did all the corrections, reams and reams of corrections in English and in Latin. She'd be sending pages back, I'd be sending pages to her, and then these were all very well corrected, you see. That made things happen more quickly with regard to getting the doctorate. So she's very much, she was open-minded, yeah.
And when you say that the monastery in France was extreme, like, what do you mean by that?
Well, you see, that's why I went really to France to get the pure form of it. Basically, most of the time I was with the Carthusians, but I was also for a couple of years at La Trappe. Now, that's where things actually got uncomfortable, and my father gave me advice by correspondence. He even came to see me. What was happening was I was writing a lot of poetry in Welsh and in English and other languages, and that wasn't going down well with the superiors, and then eventually with the superior general, and that's when I got into a bit of a difficult situation. I got this clear message from the superior general: look, this is not the orientation of the order. If you want to carry on that line, you have to change orders. So that's what happened basically. Therefore, you can see how strict
was it the content of the poetry?
No, the very fact of being. You see, the point was the gratuitous nature of the contemplative life means that you don't do that. It's showing that you need that other thing as well. It's basically not justifiable on a human means. All you can say is it makes sense in the mystical body that there is some call just to praise and worship, and therefore, if you're doing that, you're polluting your optic. It's becoming partly human. It's a difficult thing to explain, but it's called la virginité spirituelle, spiritual virginity, that you're only there gratuitously to praise like an angel, to praise and praise and praise. Therefore, if that's coming into the mind, you're not doing it well. You're thinking of men, you're doing it, you want to be a bit of the other as well. So they're trying to get that message across to me. This is not the pure Carthusian optic.
And so, how old were you then when you went to that French...
22. Well, I was already 20. First time I was 20, but I wanted to go straight from school. I stayed with them for the summer of 1974. I was there for the summer, but they wanted me to go and finish my degree, but I entered in when I was 22.
Wow. Yeah. That's a... Were you young?
Yeah,
were you one of... Were the other people there as young as you, or was this an unusual thing?
Oh no, they'd take people young if you had the clear vocation. One now who was with me, he entered it when he was on his 20th birthday actually. Now he's abbot in another house. But they would take people if you knew what they wanted, but they wanted maturity and stability, and that's the issue nowadays. You can be young and be stable, and you can be old and not stable.
And do you think that this is just a clear path from, all through your teens, that this was just leading, were you just going in that direction, or did you have any doubts? I suppose could you explain what it is like to have a calling to a vocation like that? What does it feel like?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's only something that one can understand if one has really been in there, because the same experience comes to everybody who has the call, especially the contemplative call, because it comes usually in contact with the Blessed Sacrament, because that's where it's all revolving towards, that one becomes aware of the presence and of being called towards that presence. In the case of a man, there can be a double call. It can also mean becoming involved with the priesthood. That doesn't necessarily follow, but it can be, which is therefore even more intense. And as it happens, I was entering in that situation where the two were going to be possible. But the purely gratuitous nature is not easy to actually define or justify, because it can't be justified without reference to the Creator. What we call in French the rights of God, les droits de Dieu. He has the right to call certain people out of society just for pure praise. And in that one becomes a victim soul, because one holds up the world also, because part of the parcel is penance. In the monastic life, there's a certain taking on of penance for the world. That comes into it. And if it's not happening, it means the monastery isn't kind of doing its job, basically. So that's part of the why. Now it's difficult for a young man to find that, because a lot of monasteries have lost that. Things have come in which have diluted that. So that's why it can be a bit awkward sometimes for a young man to know where to go. Mm-hmm. I was lucky in my time because it was easier. Things hadn't changed quite so much as they have now. I mean, La Trappe, we were taught the sign language at La Trappe. We had lessons on how to speak in sign language, and all that was still there, yeah.
So you literally didn't speak?
You had to have permission to speak. And with the same with the Carthusian, if you send a BA a message, it had to pass through the novice pass, and you had to sign it. It's pretty strict. And if you spoke without permission, there was a public penance. I mean, it was pretty strict. Yeah, that's why I was formed in that regime, and I didn't settle well then afterwards, because I've been formed. It was the correct way. It's difficult to explain, but it makes sense in the heritage they had. These monasteries, like La Trappe, they go right back, and they had. That's where it all started. The reform under Abbé de Rancé, and he knew what he wanted, and he was very, very strict, but it worked, and it spread over the world afterwards. Yeah, but you start meddling with that, then it becomes a bit diluted. It doesn't quite work then after that.
Okay, and the sign language, I'm interested. Like, could you speak in sign language now?
Well, the instincts still come back. I mean, the ordinary ones we're using all the time. Well, sorry about that. Can I speak to you? That's enough. Like I've eaten well, that kind of thing. But then we all had our names. I was le petit. Was it the little le religieux chargé du travail des livres, the religious chart in charge of the book work. I had to bind the books, so that's kind of, we all had our signs, and then we started off with words, and then you went into sentences, and the whole object was you weren't supposed to be hearing the voice in the cloister. It was to avoid hearing the human voice. If you had to use the voice, you had to go into one of these cloisons, the places apart where you talked with the superior, but a few words, and that was it. But no extended conversation. Yeah.
Crikey! And I mean, I know it all seems sort of normal to you, but what other aspects of life? How else was life lived in the monastery?
Yeah, well, there was no recreation, therefore the ideal was that you were in what they call the désert de Cîteaux, the desert of Cîteaux. See, you created a desert where there was solitude, but it was a solitude that was shared, and the walls of the solitude were virtual. The walls were the rule of silence. If you have a rule of silence, what they call le silence perpétuel, perpetual silence, then no one will know you. We didn't even know each other's names, except, I mean, the family name, we didn't even know them. Except we didn't know their history. They were just a mystery. Each one was a mystery. But it means, therefore, that you're completely alone. The only one you talk to is God. And that changes your psychology. If you're not talking to any human being, it makes a quite different way of living, because, you see, all the past is dead. You don't talk about it. I mean, if you have a recreation now and again, you'll talk about the past. It's all coming back. You see, all the memories coming back. That's all gone. And also it avoids all kind of things like dynamics of disagreements on opinions. It aren't any, who cares what you think? No one knows what you think. And it's purely, basically, it's liberating. You just are there with God in the whole common created desert of silence, which is, even if you're living together physically, something which isolates you completely. It creates then a great freedom. All the problem coming out of conversation is avoided. All the detraction, all the boasting, whatever it might be, talking about other people nastily, it just doesn't happen. It's a huge liberating factor in the monastic life.
Do you find that, I mean, I hear what you're saying about how that all of those things must be avoided, but I guess the flip side is that you're left with all the things inside you that maybe maybe get pushed down as a result of your communication with other people. So I would imagine that it could leave a lot of things quite raw. And I mean, as a process going in there, do people find it difficult? Do you know, to go from the outside world to go in there? Is there a process of transition where you're dealing with perhaps unexpected things that come up for you?
Yeah.
Is that an issue? I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. A lot depends actually on the intensity of your interior life when you enter, and also of how long you've spent conditioned by other conditions. You see, if you're entering very young, that's what you enter into, and it's not quite so difficult. You enter it sort of in your 40s, you're in trouble there. But to answer your question, it's not simple, because there can be times when you need to talk to somebody about what's going on inside you, and that's what Novice Master is there for, and your confessor as well. So if there's a good relationship, that does obvert certain things. If there's joy in the community, that heals a lot, and there was joy in the community. We were good. There was a big novitiate, about 10 of us, and we used to do things. Yeah, it was joy there, certainly. If it's heavy going, yes, you would have trouble. You would psychological difficulty if there's bitterness in the air, certainly. But the flip side is not that so much, it's the other one. You're not talking, but you're not talking usefully. And if you're aware that you might have gifts, that can be a bit frustrating, either writing or preaching and giving retreats and so on. That's sacrificed as well. There is no output whatsoever in practice to that side of life. So that's where temptations or whatever might come in. You think, well, am I doing anything useful here? That's the more subtle form. Yeah, that end of things.
Yeah, I actually can't imagine how difficult. For me, I would find that so difficult. Did you find it difficult?
Well, it's just that you're aware that actually about 5 hours a day you're giving to purely manual work, which is just good work, but it's there liberating.
What kind of manual work?
Oh, farming or whatever. We had the dairy work, but we had to get the cows in every day. But then also we had to make things out of what came out of the cows. At the dairy we'd make yogurt and that kind of thing. So that's the way things go towards nowadays. Modern monasteries, they tend to have an industry and not just farming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I suppose yes. You do hear of. Do Trappist? Is there beer brewed?
Oh yeah, any monastery has its own thing. Yeah, it depends which. Lots of monasteries over the world. In Belgium, they'd make beer, that kind of thing. Yeah, whatever they want to. In Cordy, I think they make perfume or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what did you just made basically things to eat for yourself, basically?
Yeah, I was involved at one stage with making little sweets. They had, there was a patisserie, or what they always call it. Yeah, that was. We had different things which made money come in, basically. Yeah, they have to be self-sufficient, and that's the whole point. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't get funding from.
No. A monastery has to be self-sufficient, and even give it to the poor. Oh yeah.
And there's no funding from the Vatican. Or...
Oh no! Every monastery has to be self-sufficient. No, that would be nonsense. If you're founding a new monastery, sometimes you're depending on benefactors until you get going, but then you have to do your own thing. Yeah.
Okay, and so the priesthood never was a calling for you at all, or is that? I mean, is that a very separate? Oh my goodness! I'm sorry. I'll just turn that off.
The priesthood in the form of actually being a parish priest.
Yes.
That really, it entered into it insofar as that actually as time went on, what actually happened was I became aware of what you're saying there, the importance of... See, I'll try and explain. What happened was my spiritual father sent me back after things hadn't worked out. I'd done some more theology in the meantime in Wales. He sent me back to Ireland, but he sent me to the Norbertines up in Kilnacrock. And there they had lots of prayer going on. They had ovation of the Blessed Sacrament day and night a lot. But then, you see, they did ordain them, and the difference is this: they lived on their priesthood. Now, do you see the dynamics there? You're not living on manual work, you're living on the fact you're a priest. Therefore, you're being prepared to work, as you're saying, as a priest. And that's actually what happened. I was transferred to Italy, and there they had a very good monastery there in Sant'Antimo, and a very young community, great chanting, it's a beautiful monastery. But then, you see, we lived on the fact once you were ordained, you were doing immediately things based on the priesthood. I was hardly ordained, I was being sent to do retreat work, sent to France and places in monasteries to preach retreats. And then I was given all these confessions to hear because I was sacristan as well. And so basically, from the beginning, you were being used as a priest. So it's therefore, to answer your question, that's the way the priesthood came into it, and that's how I was able to develop in that direction as well.
So you were ordained as a priest?
Yeah, I was ordained in Italy there fairly quickly after I got there, actually. They were very good about that because I'd done all the studies. And then that then, once you're ordained, then you just, under obedience, they do whatever you want, ready for every good work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to understand how it works. Because I mean, the Pope is obviously the head of your church, but I'm just not familiar with monasteries. Basically, that my idea of the structure of things is churches, priests, bishops, cardinals, the Pope. But for you, you're not part of that structure.
Yeah, there's a parallel structure. See, I'll try and explain. The monastic life is not part of the structure of the church, but a charism within it. It's a gift within it. Now, having said that, there's a slight difference between monks who are following the strictly enclosed Benedictine rule and that they're living on their work, and those where I was actually ordained eventually, who are actually living as canons regular, and they're more part of the structure of the church because they're being ordained by their bishop to function in that part of the church geographically. They have the care of a big church, and they have to make a solemn worship day and night there. The maximum, we had incense every day. Maximum was given to that every day. But then, under our archbishop, he could ask you to do anything, you see. So they were more a part of the structure than a completely enclosed monk would be, because that was the charism that we had when I was ordained, that we were actually open to whatever the archbishop asked us to do, which could lead to tension, actually, because he could ask us to do quite a lot of things.
Like what?
Well, take on parishes. You see if it becomes too thinly spread, you're in trouble.
Okay, and then you left the Trappist monastery in France.
I was transferred to Roscrea, and then I didn't settle. Then I went back to my studies. I didn't know.
Why were you transferred to Roscrea?
Oh, okay. I did.
Sorry.
No. I try and explain it. It's relevant. You see, what happened was I asked if I could become a hermit at that point. So they let me have a chat with one or two bishops back in Wales, and essentially they said no. So I came back straight away. I was still in the monastery, but then it was close to my vows, and the novice master warned me. Well, look, these signals of wanting the solitary life are going to be a problem because that's going to be discussed in chapter. So there I was transferred to Roscrea kind of discreetly, and there was a reason also. Roscrea had a more intellectual life. They had a college there, so they were more intellectual, which would have suited me. But then I didn't settle very well. So anyway, therefore, the reason was immediately that I'd been a bit imprudent trying to get into the hermit life while still only not yet in vows. That wasn't a very wise move to do. And I should have actually not moved, because the abbot was trying to, you stay put, doesn't matter, I'll get you through. But the novice master destabilised me a bit at that point. I listened to him, and he transferred me to Roscrea. But I wish I'd listened to the abbot, to be honest. The abbot of Ratrap, he was trying to keep me settled there, and he was right, I think, looking back. Yeah.
And so, can you explain the difference between a monk and a hermit? Can you explain what is a hermit?
Yeah, well, basically, the hermit is doing on his own what he would do in the monastery. Now, canonically, that can happen in two ways. It had been looked actually when I was in La Trappe. The abbot was willing after about 15 years to let me become a hermit. We'd have to wait that time. But that's one way of doing it. You can do it under your abbot in the property of the monastery, because lots of property, all these fields. That's what Thomas Merton did. The other way is actually under the bishop, but the bishop then has to be your abbot, and you have to submit everything to him. In fact, I've got this. The timetable is there. That he has to know all that, and you have to see the bishop regularly and write to him. And basically, he's your abbot, and you can't do anything without his. Therefore, if I'm going away, the bishop will know about it straight away. Therefore, he's your abbot. You're not here to do your own will, basically. But having said that, if you've got a good bishop, he'll protect you and not oblige you to do any parish work. So he protects you on that level. So to answer your question, the bishop is doing, the hermit is doing on his own what he would do in a community. But the only thing is, the B side is that he's got to do everything himself. If somebody knocks at the door, he'll have to answer. If somebody rings the phone, he has to answer it. Whereas in the monastery, there's a whole barrage before you get to the individual.
Okay, because everybody's sort of sharing.
Yeah, because there's a whole structure. You don't get to the individual. See, in the monastery, you can't get to a monk straight away. You go through all kinds of permissions and things before you get to the individual monk. Whereas a hermit has to do everything himself. Yeah, that's why you have to have strict, e.g. the phone is off usually, that kind of thing, and you can't get you straight away. But if they call at the door, you answer the door.
Okay. Yeah. And what was it about solitary life? Why did you want to become a hermit? Yeah.
Well, again, you can't on the human level explain that. On the mystical level you can, because you feel somehow the Lord is causing you. You see, there had been also, when I was a youth, I was reading a lot one of our great mystics of all time, our own Julian of Norwich, and she has a huge influence on me when I was growing up, and I saw the beauty of her life, because what it was, England in those days, in the Middle Ages, every village really had a hermit, a recluse. The ladies, often they would become recluses. The parish church often would have a structure where a hermit could be actually a living sacrifice, and Julian Reich was a perfect example. They'd have this little structure at the end of where the altar was. There'd be an outside cell attached to the wall of the church, at that end of the church, and there'd be one grate, one kind of grill, open towards the Blessed Sacrament, towards the altar, so you could actually worship the Lord. And she wasn't allowed to talk to anyone through that. And there'd be one grill on the other side with a curtain, a black curtain with a cross on it, and she could talk to people and give them advice, that kind of thing, through the other one. But therefore, her existence, that she was actually enclosed, physically walled in, basically sealed, she would be there until death as a living sacrifice. Well, that actually is a sublime way in which a creature can do nothing but be sacrificed, living in a living death, as it were, just praising God, there to do nothing for this world, just to be beside the altar, keeping company to the Lord. Well, that actually hit me. That's a sublime life. I thought, well, maybe it is possible. It is just about possible, but I said that the B-side is that in this situation you're very much accessible to people, so they don't understand your life. All the time you're dealing with people who don't understand your life, basically.
Yeah, I mean, weirdly, I had never heard of anything remotely like that, and a couple of weeks ago somebody told me about Kilkenny Cathedral. It's the St. Canice's Cathedral, has what you're describing.
In Anchorage.
Yeah. And she was telling me about women in the 12th century that would go in there and basically stay there. And
that's right, until they died, yeah.
I mean, that to me sounds so awful. And for you, you're like, it sounds like when you hear that, you think, wow, that sounds quite good.
Oh, well, yeah. See, there's a bit I didn't actually tell you. I was with the Carthusians all these years, for 7 years and a quarter, and there we had our own Don Damien. Now, my novice master, he'd entered when in 1936. He was already a young priest at the time. Before the war, he was there, and the group had entered at the same time, and one of them was Don Damien. Now, he was a very good man, but he therefore had gifts, and they wanted him to become procurator. That's the one who has the practical things to do. Of another monastery in Florence, so he obeyed and went off there. But when he got there, he made a little sort of protest. Look, I don't really want to be procurator. Is there any way you can let me go to the nearby? There was one.
Sorry,
procurator is the one who has to be the bridge between the community and the world. He has to do all the buying and selling. I mean, everything has to happen through him. Basically, he's the barrage. He sacrifices the people who live in the enclosure. So he's one of the brethren as a priest. So therefore, he was asked to become procurator of another monastery, Florence. He got there. And he asked, could I become a recluse? There was a monastery nearby, Camaldoli, and so there they still had the reclusion possible. And he entered reclusion there, and he died a recluse. And I knew that his cell was no longer occupied, that he was the last one to die in reclusion there, and I felt maybe I could take his place. So I went up to Camaldoli. That's going back, it's a long story now, but I did go up there. It wasn't possible, but that influence of Don Damien through my novice master was in the air. What is a beautiful life, just to be purely enclosed, just praying and praising God all day. The inspiration was there. It's difficult to explain really, but it is there. I mean, one see the beauty of it, completely separate, just having only one thing to do, praise God all day. It does make sense on the mystical level. It doesn't make sense on the human level at all. And
is that what you do?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do here, and so far as my whole day is oriented towards prayer. I mean, the time limit is back to base, and any gaps there, the kind of things that happen here. I mean, you're giving here, but usually it's confessions. Actually, I had confessions last night. The people just come and go asking for confessions. So that's one thing. The only thing the bishop asked me to do, be available for confessions. Because it's a point for the diocese where you can always get confessions with the hermit there. Priests come as well, so you're always there. And that's a useful thing for the diocese, to confession. Yeah.
So people would often knock on your door.
Yeah, for the confessions. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And would people knock on your door for any other sort of religious?
Yes, well, people come for a blessing and that kind of thing. Travelling people come, they often want a blessing, don't they? They're a very simple faith, which is hear what they've got to say, and you treat them well. It's important to treat them well. But yeah, a lot of travelling people come, for a blessing or whatever. Yeah.
Do you mean like travellers?
Yeah.
Like the caravan
Oh yeah,
travelers, like, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. See, that's the kind of people who would come because they have this very simple faith and they go around from place to place. But that's okay. They, just take them as they come.
Gosh, that's interesting. Okay, and okay, it's hard for me to understand it, but did you miss the outside world, or is that just not part of? Was this just stronger, or is there anything that you miss from having more contact with people and with society?
No, well, there's only one thing. It's the fact that it's a bit complex. There's another level again, but it's my own culture as a Welshman, because the Welsh language is important to us. So my brother, until just a few days ago, was head of the Welsh television for years. So we're into that. He's a big time the culture, the Welsh culture. There is that slight frustration. I'm never able to use that. I do every week on a Sunday morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. I have a mass in my own language, Welsh, here on this altar on my own on a Sunday morning. But that's the only Welsh I'm able to use. Basically, I hardly ever preach in Welsh because there's no occasion to. So just to answer your question, that's the element of frustration. There is that element there, guys. It's not that is not never been used.